Well, actually, it's a nice morning again. It was supposed to be raining, but it's not, thanks God. So we starting this session, and I'm moderating, and I will give the floor to Catherine Burnett from the University of West Scotland. And Dr. Burnett is a senior lecturer, associate professor and lecturer in arts and media at the School of Business and Creative Industries, University of the West Scotland. Research interests include the media and presentation of remote and island spaces, identity, ecologies, and place narratives of Scotland's rural communities, coasts, and islands, culture work, precarity, and creative enterprise, Scottish cultural heritage and arts contexts, including Gaelic and Scots, for applied creative praxis, sustainable communities, resilience, development, entrepreneurship, cultural policy, and the commons in small island, remote, peripheral, and rural contexts. So, Dr. Catherine Burnett, please, you have the floor.
Thank you. Matt, as we would say in Gaelic, original Gaelic speaker, but in Gaelic, Matt, good morning. Okay, so apologies. Normally I would read off the to read from here with colleagues exploring such a beautiful and welcoming place. Both my her life are close to the islands of the Outer Hebrides. So these islands lie to the northwest of the Scottish mainland, part of a wider region of Scotland's rural, remote highlands and islands. And this region and these islands provide a geographic and cultural framing that speaks to an arc of North Atlantic influence and integration. The area is well noted as an example of a historically fragile and modern peripheral margin. I say modern in a longer sense of the term, over some centuries. It's therefore with great interest that I find myself here for the first time, but I hope not the last, in the Azores, another great Atlantic archipelago of long influence and connections, but perhaps one too that recognises regional periphery at times. So as an early stage postgraduate student, I undertook my master's thesis on what was then termed alternative tourism, basing my research in the Outer Hebrides. That was in '92. And this early research gave me insight into the then emerging policy of regeneration and the governance of Scotland's islands and rural regions, namely to advance an increasingly diversified yet sustainable tourism visitor offer. And I've followed these trends with great interest ever since. Some questions then. So the paper is informed by a number of questions. Firstly, how is remoteness discoursed or spoken about in regard of creative tourism in islands? What of islandness as an on-trend to both profit from but also to protect against? And do policy legacies of regeneration, do they release, open out, or do they reify, close down creative tourism? When and where is local in creative tourism? And finally, and perhaps more particularly for myself here, can Scotland offer a good example of regenerative strategic success? That is, through our innovative social justice policies of community empowerment, community ownership, and collective management of local assets and policy. You'll see a lot of the dog. he couldn't come. Okay, so islands are never what they might seem. Viewed from outside as places looked onto, over to, from the mainlands or down to. And this, of course, happens between islands. The spaces and places of islandness are interesting, they're complex, and I'd like to consider Doreen Massey's insightful observation of place being a constellation of processes, and the specialness of place as one of negotiation. As she says, quote, "What is special about place is not some romance of a pre-given collective identity or the eternity of the hills, Rather, what is special about place is precisely that thrown togetherness, the unavoidable challenge of negotiating a here and now, itself drawing on a history and a geography of then and theirs, and a negotiation which must take place within and between both human and non-human. These constellations of processes, then, and their representations create and forge a skewed and stretched space of islandness and of margin. Islands, then, even very small ones, and their thrown togetherness are uneven in value, capacity, and promotion. Consider the enterprise and heritage derived from a globally iconic island heritage such as Scotland's Harris Tweed, made, of course, in the Hebrides, the Outer Hebrides. The cultural richness and ecological understanding of where and how this is consumed asks questions of regenerative narratives. What are the varying experiences of tourists what do they have as varying experience by either making the actual journey to the islands to consume here, compared with consuming via the international city tourism of Edinburgh's famous Royal Mile, consuming island textile heritage there? The axis and optics of representation are important. Here then is the stretch and the skew. Being near and far is something islands and islanders reflect on, as the good people of the Azores, I'm sure, know well. Consider Scotland's relative position to Europe, Shetland and Orkney to the north, and the Outer and Inner Hebrides to the west are our four main island groups, each a margin and a periphery of sorts in various ways. Currently, we have a significant ferry infrastructure challenge in Scotland, and there are ongoing and exacerbating remote rural inequalities and tensions evolving over who and where is the remote, or indeed the rural, and of course to what end. There are lots of good stories, but we have critique and we have ongoing challenges. So to remoteness then. Remoteness, I've suggested with colleagues elsewhere, is a good place for debate. Working particularly with my colleague Mike Danson, an economist, we've spoken at some length about this idea, particularly in Scotland. Islands and other rural places, as peripheral or not, remains a complex and contested terrain in Scotland. We are not remote here, some islanders say. But then who is this we, and when is remote? Remoteness sells, it inspires, and frequently it's claimed when useful. And from a tourism perspective, it is very much about being away, apart, far from mainlands and mainstream life. It is about being distinctive and different. It is a regenerative other. In Scotland, tropes of exile, absence, or emptiness are widespread in Scotland's place-apart imagining and image-making. Scotland's Highlands and Islands, the region I mentioned at the beginning, and that is the Gaeltacht region, which is the heartland of Gaelic culture and society, was historically marginalised, viewed as problematic over many centuries. It was termed the Highland problem by many commentators. The region, has remained a periphery in many different ways to the British Isles for, as I say, many, many years. That's, of course, changed, but there are still ongoing legacies of this. Empty landscape and places apart depictions are political, ideological. However, they are informed by a deep and stark inequity in Scotland over land ownership, over economic depopulation pressures, and concerns continue over cultural elitism and imperialism, informing the remote narratives, artistic, tourist, visual enterprise of Scotland. Where's Daniela? There's Outlander for her. So, the far west, land ownership in Scotland is a live political concern, with most land still in the hands of a few private landowners. Scotland's Highlands and Islands were historically marginalised, as I said, a place of otherness vis-à-vis the rest of the Isles, and of course from within Scotland. Early European tourism placed the area off the beaten track, where awesome wilderness such as the Isle of Skye and scientific and ethnological curiosities, including the exotic framing of St Kilda, archipelago to the further west, as place and people, clinging on at the edge of Europe's edge. This reinforced ideas of difference, and our Gaelic culture and clans were portrayed as, and I quote, a wild people, and I quote, terrible, and I quote, uncivilised. Walter Scott, the great celebrated Scottish writer, indeed European writer, and others later romanced Scotland's clans for the masses, and this continues to sell well, not least in the highly impactful Outlander television series. Much, of course, is filmed in Scotland, creating jobs and tourism income. So, Victorian tourism. Queen Victoria and Albert, huge fans of Scotland. We have a royal-approved Scottishness through Victorian legacies of tourism. Gentrified Tartanry, Hill and Glen sporting estates. These have literally shaped our landscapes. More recently, Harry Potter and his pals have impacted too, skewing further the question, where is Scotland? There has been reinvention and resistance, however. Elites then and now still have great capacity to frame our resources and the narratives of Scotland in regard of remote and well-being regenerative enterprise and leisure. Today, for example, rewilding debates and the ownership of the assets concerned is just one example where power and ideologies clash. Similarly, Scottish romance and Celtic exotica narratives require constant monitoring for the sake of the very soul of the nation, and as we look to keep at bay perhaps the worst excesses of Scottish escapism and otherworld fantasies. Some quick comments about some of the islands, and they are very quick. Shetland to the north is rich in oil and wildlife, Viking and Norse heritage, resources of the sea and fishing, as are all islands, of course. Orkney, a little further south, is a pioneering food and drink excellence destination, innovative, highly innovative with craft and design. The highly successful Shetland Wool Week Festival, celebrating knitting and wool, is just one very popular, good example of a real success around restorative tourism experience. Orkney's rich natural history and archaeology particularly offers a successful kind of symbiotic relationship to place and environment, with several excellent examples of sustainable tourism models, not least aligning with learning and educational opportunities locally. Northwest, as I've spoken about, are the Hebrides, and most iconic of all is perhaps the island of Skye, known in Gaelic as Eilean Cho, the island of mist. This complex, rugged landscape dominates promotion narratives, not always welcomed by the islanders themselves, but it is a must-do. From Harry Potter to Harry Styles and many before, and yet to come, Skye is a big pool. Islay, an island further south in the Hebrides, offers a different spirit. Scotland's flagship island for whisky production heritage is another global tourism success. And there are deeper histories. Islay was a stronghold of Scotland's coastal clan chief power base, the Lord of the Isles. But that history, for example, a huge important history to the very making of Scotland as a nation and a people, is in many ways very absent and buried from much of the promotion. Offshore from Mull is the smaller island of Iona, you may have heard of. Integral to the early Christian church, a Celtic outpost to Rome, this was St Columba's monastic powerhouse, and it was centred here on the tiniest of Scottish islands. So spiritual tourism, beyond both religion and whisky, still serves the people well across Scotland. But the thing I want to emphasise is that there's a faith and a renewal and a strength of spirit, a people's spirit, championed across Scotland's remote and rural places, as small communities apply and undertake to own and manage local assets for the greater good of their place and future. There's much to be grateful for. Scotland is amazing, a wonderful place, I would say that, but it is. And the tourism economy is strong, bringing income, enterprise, and structural development to once challenged and fragile economies. Community enterprises, trusts, and many, often micro SMEs, make for a wonderful visitor experience and good local benefit. But the discourses of remoteness and of islandness remain and require critique. And following work by Nancy Duxbury and others, I want to ask then, what is good for the margins and indeed good for creative regenerative tourism? Visitors, of course, are invited to come in and experience a, quote, island way of life, to escape, find peace, cultural richness, joy, exhilaration, stimulation, and of course, validation. It works. in visitor numbers for our islands. It is a good news story, but there are risks. Too much, too many. Just who and how is this being managed? Who and how is this being managed for in the longer term? What are saturation points in hotspots? Skye, for example, is really struggling with tourism numbers and the sustainability around that. And then, of course, there's the uneven enterprise spread. And lastly, a question of infrastructures working for all. So the legacies of concentrated private ownership remain problematic. Land ownership shapes what is possible still and how this is narrativized, discoursed in media, for example. And a complex playoff with empty lands and great houses is still the dominant image, often framing out with the region. Skyfall, James Bond, anybody? So the island of Egg here is just a very small island, but a population of just about 100 people. But it's a case study of small community resilience and resistance against, actually, the private landowning class. And there's a long history to that. But in quick terms, the community of the island came together to fundraise and buy the island for themselves about 30 years ago, thus reversing fragile and acute socioeconomic concerns for the island's sustainable future. It had been held in private ownership, deeply problematically for some many years. Scottish Government policy has increasingly facilitated community ownership of land and assets, and there are many examples, but Egg continues as a flagship example of a sustainable island, small community ethos. It requires investment locally, within the margins, but crucially from beyond. Tourism is done in the terms of the island, its local ecologies, and the residents, its collective custodians. From a Scottish perspective, then, islands offer a constellation of process and complicities, as Massey suggests. From Scotland's islands, we can argue that good margins can create good tourism. Another Hebrides example is this small company here, Uist Wool. It's a small island wool mill that retains and revitalises a sense of local craft knowledge, learning and design. Here too on the slides are pictures of Teichersavig Museum and Art Centre, not quite as big as this wonderful place here, but it is nonetheless a thriving teaching and learning space with an award-winning museum, archives, exhibition spaces, but it also has the community post office, gift shop and a cafe which is open all year round. A sustaining place, a constellation space for the island's small community, always there for any visitors from near or far. Scotland's wild places, then, are embraced and celebrated today as restorative, good for the soul and well-being. Get there and all will be well. I got here, all is much better. Economically and socially, tourism continues to stack up as a good thing, underpinning peripheral structural investment and entrepreneurial clustering, expanding visitor economies and stimulating a diverse tourism offer. But what about who is already here? Regenerative and or restorative places, how is this experienced locally is worth reflecting upon. Communities are not easily defined, nor are they fixed. Rather, they are organic, negotiated entities of significance. What, where, or when is the local of regenerative tourism activity and impact is therefore slippery, it's amorphous, and it's contingent. Nevertheless, this is a good and live debate to have, and we continue to learn and reflect. I'm so excited to go to the tea plantation later. Isle 20 is a social enterprise based on the small Sunshine Island of Tiree. It has got one of the highest sunshine statistics for the islands, this little island of Tiree. The online shopping portal of Isle 20 here, though, gives small, often micro enterprises of craft producers and artisans across the islands the chance to collectively promote, yet individually sell their products, their island products. Isle 20 reinforces a sense of how such an approach is itself a key factor in framing island restorative capital. Collectively in supporting a sense of good to make and good to sell from within the islands. Products we know, circulate powerfully to engage and inform and impact visitor expectations and dispositions. Done well by island entrepreneurs like Rhoda Make here, you can see Rhoda here on Tiree, such promotion informs online visitor experience and expectation, anticipation. Meek's own Tiree Tea is just one example of how the site situates and anchors islandness locally to the place. It speaks to a confidence and a playfulness of the island production and promotion that serves well for the destination and island quality enterprise more widely. And you can see hopefully little images there of things like the Fergie tractor and wind power, of course. Our renewable energies are a big success for us in Scotland. Macher, by the way, is another Gaelic word which refers to the very particular landscape of the wind-blown sand edge around the islands, particularly in the Hebrides. Macher. Okay, I don't have time to show you the clip for this, but I'm happy to share the link to this. The clip here relates to a Gaelic television programme, Truasa, which was looking at interviewing some local creative artists and people living and working in the Hebrides. Cultural legacies of creative othering can be long-lasting and insidious. Tourism operationalised this in various ways. It either reinforces, reifies, or it opens up. It releases different narratives and optics of how we might all see and know places. Local minority culture broadcasting voices in Scotland are producing national and international media narratives from within. This last example is of a Gaelic television programme that speaks to the creative and regenerative goodness of the island place of the Outer Hebrides, in this case particularly in winter. Hangaura Hian la Cholas Hain, or in English, the winter brings its own light. Contributors speak here of being alone, in a good place, embracing the remote, an edge or a margin of a wider sense of things. The narratives are presented as from here, not there. And creatives, cultural workers and artists are increasingly drawn back to or migrate to the islands for its regenerative spirit. And as one contributor says, a songwriter, it's the wildness of it. It's a gift, really. To conclude then, tourism of remote margins is interwoven with the representational nexus of place. This paper has spoken to Scotland's islands and highlands as a region, regenerating and reinventing complex and complicit framings of otherness. I hope to show how otherness as remoteness and islandness, I hope to have shown how otherness and remoteness and islandness continue to tie together ideas, anticipations and practice, promotions and policies for place regeneration success in Scotland. The discursive knots of misrepresentation produced from within and out with Scotland continue to challenge a sense of what is good for all Scotland, however. On whose terms we promote and manage our remote, rural and island places is a healthy and vigorous debate. And inequalities of ownership of land and assets, for example, rural and island property and housing, and who owns promotion, for example, agencies for tourism strategy, media and broadcasting, should and is critiqued. Understanding creative tourism and place regeneration success and what can or is restorative is a valuable undertaking, as colleagues have shown. And I look forward to hearing so much more from colleagues here of examples of similar great success and great practice from elsewhere. Moran Thang, thank you.
Well, thank you, Catherine, for your great presentation, showing examples of problems faced by small islands with eco-fragile systems all over the world. So we would like to learn from you lessons to overcome problems that we also have in the Azores. And let me just ask you, you have a great number of small islands there, right? But tourism is concentrated in a few of these islands, or is spread all over?
It's spread all over.
Oh, yeah. It is?
Tourism is a key growth driver for Scotland, and it is spread all over. There are differences of scale, of course, like the Azores, I'm sure, but yeah, no, all of the islands would work with tourism in different ways.
Okay, so you don't have problems of carrying capacity?
I would, with the exception of particularly the island of Skye that I mentioned, that some people may know of, it's very, very popular.
Okay.
And recently, in the last few years, it really is hitting the headlines with real capacity issues for sure. Yeah.
Okay. And do you impose limits on the number of people that...
Not yet.
Okay.
But they did build a bridge. I mean, one of the quick things to say about Skye was an island proper, very close to the mainland, but then they built a bridge, which was an issue in itself, and that has, over time, just made it just so much easier to come and go from. But at the some of the key sites in Skye, there are huge issues with capacity carrying, the roads, parking, the impact on the local community. So Skye, perhaps, is one particularly, yeah, for sure.
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'll open the floor for questions. Now or at the end? What? Now.
Ah, yes. Okay, so it's Shetland Wool Week. Shetland Wool Week. It is in the very north, the group of islands to the very north is Shetland, and they have this, it's in the summer, and I can give you a link if you would like, for sure. But actually textiles and wool, that's why I talked about Harris Tweed, of course, and also elsewhere, wool and textile is a really interesting sort of sub-economy, if you like, particularly around tourism and heritage. But it's Shetland Wool Week, and it's big, lots of international visitors to that. Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
More questions? Nancy, you want to make a question? Any question?
I'm happy to wait to the end.
Okay. Okay. So, thank you, Catherine.
Thank you so much.
And now I will call to the floor Professor Giovanni Ruggieri. Professor Giovanni Ruggieri is graduated in economics from the University of Palermo. He studied at the University of Hertfordshire in the UK for a semester. He earned the Doctor of Philosophy, PhD in Tourism Sciences at the University of Palermo. Adjunct professor in applied economics. He's the author of several articles on tourism, published in international scientific journals concerning the economic impact issues, the birth and development of a tourism destination, and the growth of tourism economies in the island territories. He is a UNESCO Management Plan Working Group member for the Sicily UNESCO Foundation, president of the Observatory on Tourism for Islands, Economies, and chairman of the Scientific Committee, and where there are professors and international experts. Research topics with particular attention to island realities concern the tourism, economy, innovation, micro-enterprises, and networks. So, my dear good friend, Professor Ruggieri, you have the floor.
Thank you, Professor Santos. I didn't remember all these things I did in the past for islands. Huh? Thanks to remember me. Well, good morning. Also, if there is, electric lights. And happy to be in Azores again for the second time, speaking about islands. Well, just a second. What I would like to present you today is just a recent article published on Economist journal, based on this dualism that we have. Community or industrial tourism, sustainability. No? Tourism is a good word that you can associate with everything. It works. So we can invent and create everything. It works. But sometimes we don't know what is it, how we have to manage. And so the idea for islands is just to understand islands that are limited land, limited population, and then how to do, which are the development strategies. This is the idea of the paper. I come from Sicily. I say a big island of Mediterranean. I manage this observatory of tourism for island economies, based in 2007. When we start, islands had a lot of problems, and we tried to convince with research European Commission to say that islands should have a different policy because they are different places in terms of economics, politics, and others. They said, islands, you are a few people, you are, what do you want? Money, what? And we said, well, we start to count people in islands, who lives in islands. And we are 25 million in European islands. More than 3,500 islands worldwide. We have islands in Atlantic Ocean, in Pacific Ocean, European islands, speaking about, in Indian Oceans, everywhere. There is also an island, Sweden, near the South Pole. Okay, we didn't know. We discover every time new islands. So finally, after this work, could be useful for you. First the Parliament, first the Commission, European Commission, second the Parliament, arrives to modify the Treaty of European Union, recognize islands' condition that is different. So policies, programs are, now different from islands and non-islands territories or mainland territories. This is a very great success. And also in some constitutions, Italian constitutions, we modify one article, said that these territories that has islands conditions should be dedicated, should be protected, and specific policies. So in the constitution of, I think, of France or Spain, we have it already, and then in Italy too. So what is this dilemma of development on tourism? So let's start with the article. Of course, tourism now in Europe, it's a word very used for everything. If I don't have any options, tourism could be good for territories. Everything. Every people speak about tourism, politicians, local people. And it's difficult to understand, sometimes the direction. So this abstract would like to analyze these islands, 16 islands, in the past years, in 10 years past, and trying to know the direction that we follow in industry model or community-based tourism model. Okay, the community is very important. I will tell you later on. So first, we start about literature. As a professor, of course, we look every time at literature. And as you look in the literature analysis in Scopus, we analyze with this special software, like Semanters, how many, spoke about industry and tourism. Okay, and we found, you look at that, in 2022, we had a lot of production of tourism industry research. Okay, so it means that it's interesting, the industry, the approach of industry research. So it means that something will happen in the future. So we try to understand with Lexmanter the main words associated with tourism. Okay, more is big the part, more literature we have. Okay, so on that, and what we discovered that. Okay, just a second. Oh, all right. Okay, what we discover is that, in literature, tourism industry of course, is connected with tourists, with the demand, hospitality more, with COVID as well in the last 3 years, countries, development, little environment, and analysis. So it means we still are working in these fields. So we have some literature that speak about tourism industry model thematics. And we try to understand, what they analyze: relationship, competitiveness, clusters, and others, services. Okay, this is the 10 pillars of tourism industry model. Big hotel establishments, okay? Big number of rooms. A big number of hotels with a large number of rooms, because you can get scale economies, of course, okay? And you can manage better the destination. You can have external demand, intermediation from tour operators, so it's starting a big industry. External investors, such international hotel chains, okay? We ask, okay, come, build, invest money, we need it to build this kind of industry destination. High level of employment, we check how many people works, because they are employers in the hotel, hospitality and other industry. High level of local population, because they need it, they would like to work in the industry. Participation of the public sectors connected with industry. So the industry said, we need this, we need more flights, local flights, and the policy said, okay, we have a big numbers, we have to cooperate, we need your support. And the public gives a lot of support to these big industries. A management destination system, someone who manage, this big number of investors, and also level of imported products. Okay, in islands, we cannot produce for all the tourism demand, so they increase imports of goods. And non-direct tourist sectors related to tourism expenditure, so it means that only tourism sector received benefits, okay, not the others. This is a very important concept, because the money that remains in tourism sectors are 48% or 45% in islands, in European islands, and the others go to the other sectors. The 80% as imports, okay? So economics benefits are most of the time not in the island, of course. Malta has this big example. And then, of course, a group of tourism services, very mixed, very well mixed, very well done, in protocols and others. Planning, promotion for the destination. Okay, this is the tourism industry supply. Okay, the opposite in the literature, we found this other 10 pillars for community. Community is very important because we plan using territories. The geographers wrote a lot, these territories, the territory, the place, and the people should cooperate. So, first of all, we have self-employment. So if you check the numbers of employers, you don't find. You find little employers in tourism. They said, how is possible? We have a lot of tourism and little people that works on tourism. They are self-employed. They manage, they own bed and breakfast, they rent houses. So you cannot check in the statistics. So it seems tourism is not important. Second, diffuse entrepreneurship among communities, trying to start up to create services, creative services, trying the people move to that directions. Accommodation based on non-establishments, okay? So you cannot see the big investment, but local ones, little by little. A small dimension of local business. Look, in islands, we have not SME, we have micro enterprises. The 90% are micro enterprises, less than 9 employers. So we cannot imagine politics for SME in islands. It's impossible. Local services are usually offered for the local people. They offer what they have, not they offer what the demand want. Okay, I have this, I offer this. Okay, maintaining a local supply, self-management destination. The people, cooperate each others because they know each others in the islands. All the people, they know, they have a family relationship, they have a friendship relationship. So they don't need a manager destination, no. They know already, they have informal networks. Okay? Then community company networks based on trust. The people work together because they trust each other. Not because there is a measure that said you have to cooperate, no. Or there is a president of consortium, no, not at all. There are people that are destination leader, very important, that help to develop, to increase, to diffuse this kind of entrepreneurship in hospitality. Public sector support, local community, difficult support because, should be involved in the community, very involved in the system, in this neighbor system that we don't check, we don't see, we ignore, okay? Because of course we see, but we ignore. And then common vision policies are shared and decided with the people, okay? Not in the big building, but in a meeting, in a bar, when they meet each others. So how is difficult community-based tourism to develop, to increase, to create? What we did, numbers. Okay, I don't know if it's so clear. Okay, we put together some numbers, okay? Sorry, this is a big scientific part, so to finalize the conclusions, okay? So the panel, we check the population variation, 2010, 2019, so pre-COVID. Then also hotel establishment, numbers of hotel establishments, no hotel establishments, numbers from 2010, 2019, international arrivals and employment. Okay, these variables, why not more? Because, find numbers in tourism, it's quite impossible. So we found for that islands. What we did a methodology based on variation on these 5 variables, okay, in 10 years' time. Of course, we ask the support of statistical methodology. It's called principal component analysis, just to know which are the main component analysis, and on the panel, okay, just to know which kind of variables are so important. Then FAC1 is the number, the reference number of this factor analysis, and we have a number, okay, total number, and we have islands. So what we found, well, with a synthetic number, okay, we found that the top of the class is Malta, Maltese islands. There are 6. We think it's 1. There are 6 islands. And Malta, the point is 2.475, 475, okay? The first. And the last is Martinique, minus 1.501. Can you see? Okay. So, what does it mean? It means that more high is the number, more we are near the industry model. We have a lot of employment, increase in tourism, a lot of establishments, increase of population, increase of international arrivals. Mm-hmm. Or the other islands followed in the past another model that is based on this kind of rent houses, spontaneous hospitality, local policy, just learning by doing things, some islands. Why it's, there are, islands that they didn't choose yet, the model. They said, we create this destination, industry destination model, like Cyprus, like in Malta as well, in Malta and St. Julian's, this is the model. Okay? But in Gozo, the opposite island is not. It's totally opposite, it's community. Okay? When they want to rest, they go in another island, the Maltese. They say, I need to rest. I go in another islands to rest without no big tourism. So what does it mean, Sardinia, Sicily? It doesn't depend how big or small, but which kind of model for post-COVID era is? The big industry or a community? Community is very difficult to develop, takes time, training, but is more impactful in terms of economics, local economics. Okay, community-based tourism is a driven supply approach. Okay, tourism industry model is a driven demand approach. What does it mean? That we look at the demand first, then we modify the place. Okay? The opposite is we have this to offer. We choose a tourism demand segment that could fit with our habits to maintain authenticity. Because if we work on destination, according with the demand, we modify totally the place, the people, the authenticity, and is industrial model. Okay, so we have to take care how community-based tourism could start with the idea of industry. We get money, we need money, okay, we rent houses. So, results. Two group of islands, family islands, okay? The one, Malta, Réunion, is a French island near in Indian Ocean, near Madagascar. I had a conference there, Carlos, very interesting. 12 hours flying from Paris, 12 hours. More than 800 people every day arrives. The sea is not so good in Réunion. There are sharks. But they go there for volcano. More than 250 activities connected with the nature tourism-based tourism, okay? And with no industrial model. Anyway, Azores and Cyprus developed a reticulum of well-structured tourist industries, centrally coordinated or managed. Industrial organization place-based with a different level of specialization and agglomeration economies. Okay, so we try to increase revenue, to increase occupation. So this is the model, immediately the model. And the second group are, of course, demand driver approach based on external investments. So the first are more community. The second, we need destination, well organized, well done, attract people, high numbers, okay? Because the model is industry-based model, so we cannot follow the others, okay? And when we speak about stakeholders, they are few, they manage the destination, okay? So they already manage the destination. So findings is that, well, sometimes we need a fast development. We need development now, immediately. So we ask for external investors. We have a lot of examples in worldwide, Cancun in Mexico, Hurghada or Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, from Italian. In Italy, we develop this kind of destinations and others. What's about islands? Lesson. We go following St. Julian's Malta model. We go following, Cyprus model with a very innovative hotels, design hotels, because it's more attractive. Or we work with people. This is the main aspects. And in islands, this kind of results, the main results, are that we have to move from demand approach to supply approach. We are a bit scared. My territories could attract people for relax. Okay? for no service product. I don't offer you TV, I don't offer you Wi-Fi, I don't offer you anything, and you pay a lot, Maldives Islands model. Because I will not give what the others do for your relax, okay? So there are some islands that develop this kind of model. Okay, tourism is totally, we have to change. To follow community-based approach, we have to change the language, okay? First of all, we don't have to use any more tourism, but this I suggest, but travelers. Travelers has a lot of motivation, more than tourists. So tourists is a limited motivation, according with the WTO definitions. Travelers, we have infinitive motivation to travel. Also to meet friends, okay? Is a tourist motivation? No, it's a travel motivation. So work more than travel motivation. And also develop this kind of relational tourism. Tourism based on relation on people, okay? Because we are in the no tourism era. When we travel, they said, are you a tourist? We said, no. I don't want to be, to be as a tourist, to be monitored with my GPS. I do everything, what I spend, okay? This is industry approach. I am a person. So the language should be changed. They are temporary residents. Why not? They pay taxes. No? City tax they pay, so they are temporary residents. So this kind of tourism is based on people. And we have to check the people. We have to, to speak with them, just to work with them if they want tourism or travelers in their places. Not because we have to spend money of the project. We have to ask, do you know what you mean? And for islands, it's very important because islands, for 80%, are based on tourism, travelers, and services, European islands. Okay, so we don't have a lot of options. And the idea is just to work on local productions, of course, not only direct, the wine, but all the local production, trying to connect with the travelers' aims, with the travelers' motivations. And also motivation to go in an islands are a lot. We are unbelievable, really, really, to stay in an island, to live in an island, or to move in an island. This is a very important aspect, how many people move, the nomadism, or the people that works in island and a distance work. Okay, these are the main vision of this article. There are some recommendations for policies for islands, some recommendation to how to develop, but we need people, we need training for community, and we need to keep authenticity. Really, it's very difficult. We don't have to transform the people in entrepreneurship in as an industry tourism, because they look at industry model, at the big hotels, services, okay, prescriptions, okay, labels, okay, but it doesn't work if the people don't feel this kind of motivation to host people and to host the world in a little islands that we feel we are abandoned, remoteness, territories. I hope this opposite vision, of course sometimes it's mixed, could help you to follow the new direction of community-based tourism in places and to keep the capital, human capital that a place have, and we don't count, we don't see, we just arrive at the end after the plan. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much for your great presentation and the model you have presented us, highlighting some issues which are important for all islands. Let me just ask you, how do you overcome the problem of lack of scale economies in small tourism businesses?
Thank you. Thank you, Carlos. This is a very important question. Thank you for this question, this economic question, because Okay, to earn more money, we need scale economies. In these little examples of little houses, rental house and others, we need another kind of economies, okay? That are relational economies, that are, network economies. We call network economies. So if I work with others, I can increase local economies. This is the important vision. But if the network works, we can develop, we can have. If the network doesn't work, doesn't work, we cannot have it, okay? But, so it's very, very difficult. That's why the academia or the people that works in these connections, and they have the trust of the people, it's fundamental. It's, one, important things.
Thank you. And you know that the hotel industry is now diversifying and entering the small unit, the small businesses, accommodation businesses. They're entering the guest houses, the boutique hotels. So they're entering this small scale business as well. And you mentioned the case of Maldives. But the case of Maldives is very special because the main attraction, the differentiation factor is one island, the formula, one island, one hotel, one island, one hotel. And it's very much focused on honeymoons. And you know very well Michael Porter's model. And this focused niche strategy has some dangers for destinations. So, okay, so let's now open the floor to the public.
Questions? Okay.
Yes, Nancy?
I hope to stimulate more questions, okay? Because it's a very interesting debate.
Nancy? Thank you very much. Oh. Which one?
There is one first? Okay,
Go ahead, Nancy. I could ask afterwards.
Okay. Mine is a particular question, and I don't want to go back to the tables and the numbers. But what struck me is that the Azores was the island on your list that had the greatest number, I guess, increase in international arrivals, but one of the lowest number in employment increases, which means to me that something's wrong and that it really isn't, it's either very stressed. The other thing that struck me was that Madeira is within the community-based tourism model. But if you visit Madeira, it's all big, huge hotels, et cetera, the tourism. And I'm wondering what might be missing is the historical story. So Madeira has the industrial model. Everything is already built. So what is left to do is the community. I don't know if I'm thinking. The top of a cake, kind of sprinkles, okay. And here it's a less developed, so maybe it's that earlier stage where the centralization had to get it started. But I was very struck by the huge increase in international arrivals compared to all the other islands.
Okay, thanks for the questions. It's of course this number, this factor analysis put together, the islands are not, industrial tourism model and the opposite part, the community. Of course, they are mixed. Some parts are follow the industrial model in some parts, another one more, community. The difficulties is to find which community model because it's, we have in islands. But we don't measure, we ignore, okay? Like Airbnb and others. How many houses empty we have in islands? A lot. And we don't know exactly how to use it. So we can have in community-based tourism an increase of international arrivals, but the people don't want to be employer of the industry. So they manage their own business in a own way. Second, of course, how is possible? I can answer with the example, I will be very quick, of Balearic Islands and also of Malta. Because when I start to study Malta with the Malta Tourism Authority, they said, no, professor, please, no community. We have the big industries here. We cannot speak about that because we lose tourism. I said, yes, but it's the future. But after 5 years, they start to develop this community-based tourism, okay, for local people, because the people ask to do this. They did already. So the policies after. So in Balearic Islands, did the same. Okay, so you can come for the tourism industry holiday, and you can come to stay with the population. The fact, also in Croatia and others, is that the number of no establishments in islands are more than hotels establishments. So it means that this economy of community that we don't see, we don't check, we don't monitoring, is more relevant than industry wants. So we have to work on it. We cannot escape. We said, okay, we do a plan. No, we have to work on it. Because it should increase the local economy. This is very important. I don't know if okay. Another question, please.
You spoke about training, but in a form that's not so corporate and large hotel-like. And so I feel like sometimes people struggle with how to provide high-quality service while still maintaining kind of like a family feel or a local, genuine feel. So I was hoping you can describe what that would look like, or perhaps you have some examples that already exist.
Thank you. This is a good dilemma. Because if there is a community that hosts, I try to give, I am a tourist industry professor. I said, and community industry professor, and I said, okay, the people ask for standards. Okay, you have to do this, like in the industry. But when I travel and I go in, and Carlos invite me, for example, in his house to spend 1 week, I don't ask him, sorry, which kind of, can you tell me how many stars have you in your house? Which facilities? Why? Because I trust him. So I don't need it. Because we have a friendship, we know each other's. So what we are looking in the future is that to be local for sometimes, and not to have this industry. Okay, about training, it's important. Generally, we train the manager, the people from the industry, not local people. I start to train a little town people in a little town in the middle of Sicily, nominated Italian town, Italian little town in the countryside. And because when they were, this city was nominated, arrived a lot of people, a lot of excursionists. No hotels, no 2 restaurants. And they said, what we can do? I said, okay, please, don't invest in big hotels, just do training. And we did training with the population in the city hall. And they asked me, one for few words of English. Another lesson was the relationship they have to share, and they have to be as they are, not modification. They said, as professor, we have to print a T-shirt, we have to print, souvenirs. So no, at all. This is the industry model. And so we, in the class, there are a barber shop, there were, the people from the local, the local bar, coffee shop, and others. And the atmosphere was really, okay, we are here, we can, we are here to offer you how we are, okay? We not change. I don't know if... And one difficult example, if I can do, was in Aeoli Islands. There are 7, like the 7 sisters of these islands. UNESCO, they said, we don't want anymore stay in UNESCO World Heritage List. They were the first islands in the UNESCO for the volcano activities. The Stromboli volcano activities is still active, of course. And at the beginning, they said, I was there with the UNESCO Commission, and they said, okay, we don't want limitation. The government asked to close the only industry we have, and we lose more than 200 workers' employments. For UNESCO, We don't want to stay out UNESCO. And of course, the local politicians said, it's not our fault. It's the UNESCO Commission. And so when we was in the island, we are a bit scared because the people were against us. Oh, do you want to put limitation in our island? This is our island, not UNESCO Italian. No, it's our island. So at the end, we start little by little to stay with the population, little by explain the plan, and change the workers, training, and after 3 years, they develop a great economies, and great economies, and but they, wait 3 years, little by little for this process. It was very long, but we need to do this. Other questions?
I'm sorry,
Okay.
can I just ask an additional to that?
Yes.
So you said that they had the barbershop and that community feel, and the idea is to stay as you are. So can you just briefly touch on what the change was? So the training was for what? If we stay as we are, what are we changing while still maintaining what we are?
Yes, it means they need to speak, to have the competences and the main basic information, how to speak with another population. So basic word of English, not course of English, no, basic words to transfer the name of the product, for example, to count the money, how much it costs to one things. And this was the little change. Another one was not to be friendly, to stay friendly, because in islands, in these small, villages, they are friendly, of course, because they are not habits to stay with tourists, with international market. And also just to try to understand better the products to offer. Why olive oil or virgin olive oil? So training to say what they have and what the world is looking for. Because if you know, when you go in a place, the locals, we as locals, we would like to check to find as local international restaurants, international things, because as islanders we are isolated. So I bring you in international restaurants, and as a tourist, as a traveler, I said, no, please, local one, but local, original local, not local, for marketing. So this is very important. So the people who live would like to be international. The people that comes would like to be local. So this is very interesting things when you say, how I have to manage this supply in an original way. Yes.
Thank you. Do you think that in islands, the network economy works better or easily than inland places? And the other question, if I may ask already, is what recommendations would you give to micro businesses, people, to put into practice the network economy, particularly in places where people sometimes are not very keen on cooperation? Sometimes an expression that I hear is closed mentality, and also I forgot the word now, but they are not very happy sometimes to join networks where the public organizations are in, because they don't want to go to meetings and so on and so on. So that would be my questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alexandra. Two questions. The first question it's very important. In islands, it's more difficult, less difficult to create network. Well, in islands we have networks already done, but not based on business, based on family, friendship, connections. We know each other's in an island, in a small island, also in a big island. We know each other's. So we have to use this kind of relationship that are very strong, moving in a direction of cooperation. Well, it's important, we can do in two ways. First, calling an external from islands. we say nemo profeta in patria sua, it means no one of the network could be the leader, could be the top leader, okay? But one may be outside that say, okay, we do this. So as injection of other trustable person, not label, okay? Person that could, try to orientate all the people to go in one direction, to explain the relationship and others. So in islands it's easy because we have a relationship, but it's difficult because we need people. Finally, I just published an article just 1 month ago in Annals of Tourism Research, where we found, with Professor Baggio and Iannolino, we found 5 mediators, brokers, we call, that they connect all the others. And some of them are leaders, informal leaders. So we have to find this and to create a group, okay? But in an informal way. If we start with formal way, it doesn't work, okay? So if you do a meeting in a measure with all the partners, politician, it doesn't work. But, for lunch, you invite them for lunch, stay together, and this is the best way for managing formal. And we have a case in Sicily that works very well in 20 years' time in this way. No public policies, no training, and they little works, no crisis in the demand, always growing. And we studied that case at how is possible, spontaneously. They are little houses, they are, small. San Vito Lo Capo is the case study. You can read, I can give you more information. If you follow that model, could work. We need time, of course, and we need people, little by little, tell you no. Because when you say, no, it's not possible. I don't want to cooperate with him, okay? Don't mind. But we have group that already cooperates each other. So if we work with these clusters group that are not hotels, they are not separate. They are people. So maybe one restaurant is friends of one hotels, it's friends of one car rental. So they are friends, they cooperate, they stay together, not for business, because they trust each other. To be trustable is very difficult, because you cannot have a label, I'm trustable, you have to demonstrate. So it's difficult. University could do a good job on this, or university on others. People that have this are trustable for the others. So find these people, find this person, and then you have the network. I will be quick. I will do quick answers. Sorry.
Yes, I'll be very brief too because we're certainly over time. I too was very surprised, as Nancy was, with your comparison of the Azores and the Madeira Islands, because in fact Madeira is based on industry tourism, really. Perhaps at this point, in the last few years, there's been some changes. And we here in the Azores, in fact, it's growing. We are having more tourists and stuff. But I wanted to go to the issue of less employment, which hasn't been talked about here yet. But according to findings and studies, the COVID changed many people's perspective and relationship to work. Many people are not now thinking life's too short. I'm not going to accept this job that pays so poorly. And that's a problem here in the Azores. Many people are shying away from tourism because it is not an industry and a practice that pays well, that gives employee benefits, etc. It's a problem. I see it as a big problem. And I'm wondering if other islands are experiencing this, because we live in a post-COVID world, and we need to deal with that constantly. It's not something we can forget. Thank you.
Yes, you're right. The post-COVID accelerate this model of community, of people, no? During the COVID-21, a lot of, we have in the islands an increase of people that choose this kind of, of houses with local people, not big hotels. They are scared, they were scared about COVID, of course. This model, it's, a model not for all the markets, of course. okay, but some markets. But this kind of markets of travelers that travel a lot would like to choose and to learn and to stay with people, with local people. And this is the news. And islands and small villages, towns could follow this model if we are able to organize it in a post-COVID. So it's the time to follow this new model for islands, I think. Thank you for your questions. COVID changed a lot of markets. Yes?
Professor, good morning.
Good morning.
I'll try to be quick. It's your present. First of all, I want to say thank you for your presentation, because I think it's just like you just took the veil out of the elephant in the room, and it's so empowering to see the numbers. It's just so easy to understand things. I'll try to be quick for not taking the opportunity from the other people. I have two questions, but I also want to say I'm sorry that we don't have government representation on this room to see your numbers. I think it will be very important that we have some local authorities to see what is happening, and there's this very clear picture of what's happening on these islands. My question, the two questions is, do you believe that the industrial model can somehow live with a philosophy of regenerative development or even sustainability, because that's somehow what they sell? And I'll start with that one.
So sorry, the question is, sorry.
So the question is about, do you think the industrial model somehow can live in parallel with sustainability or regenerative development?
With the creative tourism as well, together.
Yes, yes.
This is okay. If we can stay together, industry and creative. Of course, creative model, it was very interesting yesterday, presentation. I follow, very, very interesting. And thank you for your research and projects. Of course, creative is something new. It's like a declination of innovation, according to me. So to be creative, to create, to be different, is try to attract more tourism demand in a different way from the others. This is the idea. I can work in a creative tourism as more example in an industrial way, creative. So I organize a meeting with the local people as an excursions. So this is an industry model. Or I can just, create a home restaurants. Not, standard restaurants, home, so you can host people at your house. And but the question is, we have to standardize, we have to give the license, no? So we try to move everything to the industry, and sometimes it's good, sometimes is not so creative. So yes, creative is in both directions, could work. I don't want to say that industry is bad and the community is good. No, are totally different models.
And on a much more centralized environment, more and more we're moving into a centralized and controlled environments, economical, political, everything. You think that decentralized model, the community-based, have a future on this kind of way forward? Because I don't know if everyone feels the same way, but I feel that we live on a world post-COVID that is more centralized. All the power and all information tends to centralize on governments, institutions, everything. Do you believe that the decentralized model will have space in the future? You say that it's the way forward, it's the future, but how these two realities can live together? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The environment is a big question, and also they could survive together. Okay, it's how can I say? The sociologist said that who choose a place, a destination, industry tourism destination, we call it a reverse zoo customers. So he said he is the lion inside the zoo, and he will find everything there, okay? The opposite model with the community is the Hermanus syndrome. Hermanus syndrome, it means I travel, I will discover, I don't want information. I would like to adventure my experience with people. Okay, so it's a totally different way of travel, and this more oriented to the future. About the information, of course, information creates network economy. So we have to try to share information between people or with a WhatsApp, group, or with technology, or just speak with people in a small, towns, because more big is and more difficult is to manage this kind of, of community-based tourism. I sell other services. I offer other services, other friend services. It's not a tourism product. The people choose what to buy, what to stay, when, the time, okay? And I suggest friends go there, taste this. I call my friends. In islands, it's very easy. We have already this model. Thank you.
Excuse me. My name is Daniela. I come from Croatia.
Oh, wow.
So it's a country of 1,000 islands, right? At least in the marketing narrative. So my question would be, do you think that along the same line as the economy of scales and network economy, some kind of standardization in a good way, like in a good tourism model, could be achieved through by the way of the Italian model of diffuse hotel, albergo diffuso, or Italian concept of cooperative, which would actually be connecting people who are already connected, but in a way of achieving some kind of a standard of the authentic tourism, of creative tourism, offering something very local, but in a good way.
Yes, thank you. It's very interesting, your question. Thanks a lot. Of course, standardization. I suggest to use another word, standardization. Just cooperation, just stay together to learn together. It's a learning community. Where is not a professor that say you have to do this, or a politician, this is the model, follow. No. But little by little share this information, this learning community to develop, network economies. Of course, they need to learn. Really, these people we can rent a house, a second house I can rent, but maybe what I can do, I just try to do my best, put my offer in the social media, in this big website, OTA, and they said, okay, sell, I'm here, that's it. And I don't know nothing about the tourism, about the hospitality. So training with some rules, I agree with you, not rules, but pillars to follow altogether. So this could really, really help, of course, to offer different standards of services, of course. We need it. But we have to do. If we don't do, sometimes it's good, the experience, sometimes it's not. So that's it. And we can check on TripAdvisor that already said good or not. So it's already a check, a market check. Yes.
Thank you. So,
hi. From Brazil.
Yeah, I'm Larissa from Brazil.
Hi, Larissa.
Yes. I was wondering what is the boundary between a community-based model and a precarious way of working in tourism industry? Because regarding Madeira example, that has a strong industrial tourism model, in which way this community model is only an accessory. They are vulnerable to gentrification, to price battles, and once they are organic and they have no public policies organizing it, they have no assurance of their work as they're organic. We know that industrial model is powerful and has many backgrounds, and in which way this is not a precarious way of developing the activity.
Thanks, very, very important. Before COVID-19, I was involved in a European project on over-tourism. for Venice, for another Spanish city, Genoa. Yes, no, not Barcelona in south.
Palma.
No, it's not an island, it's near the island. But anyway, I will remember in a few minutes, in a few seconds. And because the decision was to reduce tourism, So Balearic Island developed the marketing plan. So how can I reduce the number of establishments and rooms, but increase the revenue, of course. Okay, I cannot lose money. So they did this. But over tourism, I can have with the tourism industry model. With the community-based tourism model, I cannot have over tourism because the people choose, not the politician, not the investors. Okay, so this is a good and bad way of both model. About you said that the network, the people, how it's possible. Of course, it's another model. First, we have to count. We have to measure in statistics. Imagine nautical tourism. Nautical tourism are floating hotels. Do we count in islands? No. Okay. In Sicily, in some islands, we have the same number of hotels in the islands and the same number of beds in islands, the same number of beds in the sea. That moves. We don't monitoring. We don't check how many tourists comes from the sea and stay there for months, for weeks, So first is just check. Second, and it's easy because they are on the web, so it's not so difficult. Second, trying to, of course, to help them, okay? Because they are not managers. They do another work in most of the cases, okay? I am employee of a public administration. I am professor at university, and I have other 2 houses in the islands, and I can rent, okay? So I don't feel to be a manager, but of course, I need to have know-how how to do this in these directions. Because not the dilemma, what's happened is that when I open a bed and breakfast or I rent my house, I follow the industrial model. Why? Because I feel to be competitive with hotels. So come here. You have a suite. You pay only the half price of the hotels. You have internet. You have a TV. You have all the services you have in one hotel. And this is wrong because it's a wrong competition. Community is a model. Industry is another model. Sometimes if I don't have this, if I don't learn this, I just to follow trying to get, customers from the hotel industry. And this is, is not good for competition. So hotels should be hotels establishment model. So with all services that I cannot find in the little houses, and then is another model. We have to try to move these 2 directions. So I can choose one or the others. It depends on the market.
Okay.
Did I answer all the questions?
Yes, thank you.
Can I have
thank you.
a final score for...
We are running out of time.
Thank you for your interest. Please write me an email if you want articles and others. In my webpage of the university, you can find a lot of articles on this. If you need it, download. Most of them are free articles, published in free journals. So please use it for your work, for your future work, I hope. Thanks a lot, Carlos, and sorry for the time.
Thank you very much. I will now, but just let me tell you, we are talking many times about Madeira. Madeira is diversifying its product and its offering. And it's offering nature-based tourism as well. And it's offering nautical activities and dolphin whale watching, not but dolphin watching. And many, they have a wonderful indigenous forest. So they are really providing what we want now. We want diversity. We now don't have tourists that just want to stay in nature. We want tourists that want to stay in nature, but they want also to enjoy a good hotel, and good comfort, good meal, and some sophisticated places. And they're offering this diversity. That's a very important lesson that we have to learn. We don't talk about genuine or not genuine, we're talking about diversity. Some people like to have some genuine things in certain times and not genuine things on other times. So, yeah, that's very important. That's one very important point. A strong branding, strong positioning, clear targeting of the market would help a lot. Okay, but I don't want to take time. I'm going to give the floor now to Professor Vitor Ambrosio. He's going to talk about the Khmer Rouge way as a promoter of sustainable and creative tourism. He's a PhD and has been teaching at the Israel Higher Institute for Tourism and Hotel Studies since 1991. He also teaches in several master and doctoral programs from other institutions. Prior to this, he had worked as a travel agent, promoter, and tourist guide. His main research interest is religious tourism. His PhD thesis is on religious tourism, the development of sanctuary towns. He's the author of the book Fatima as a Religious Center for Incoming Tourism. He's also the author of several book chapters and scientific articles on religious tourism. So we might summarize saying that he is the national reference in the field of tourism, religious tourism. So I give you the word.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much for your presentation. I will try to be short because we should be now at the coffee break time, and probably everybody wants to have the coffee break. But sometimes it's difficult to speak in less than a quarter of an hour, 20 minutes, if we've got the presentation prepared for half an hour. But anyhow, I will try to be short. So I want to pay tribute to the conference organizers and to congratulate them for this successful conference. I also want to thank you for the kind invitation. And in my communication, I will propose to develop a pilgrimage way in San Miguel depicting an annual tradition. What I'm proposing is, in fact, a new tourism product where tourists discover San Miguel while walking and participating in creative activities based on Azorean arts and crafts. The presentation is based on images, and each picture reflects an intended approach. So I'm going to follow a little bit Giovanni's advices, but I will be less theoretical and I will be more pragmatic speaking and proposing something about this island. So, what is pilgrimage? Pilgrimage, many authors state that pilgrimage is generally believed to be a transformative journey through which pilgrims experience a sense of freedom because it allows individuals to accept the natural rhythm and limitations of the body. In fact, most of people going on a pilgrimage way nowadays, they are not anymore real pilgrims. They don't really do it for religious purposes. They do it in order to discover themselves, to reflect about their own life. So let's say that a pilgrimage way, and there is a very, very good one here in Azores, it is the base for the tourism product which I'm going to propose. So, for the ones here from the Azores, mainly from San Miguel, all know this tradition. The foreigners coming from abroad, they don't know. I will try to describe very shortly what is this Romaria Quaresmal, as you can see then translated to English, Lent pilgrimages, because they are performed only between Carnival and Easter. Due to that reason, they are known as land pilgrimages. In São Miguel, those pilgrimages take place every year. The origin of the pilgrimage dates to the 16th century, so it's about 500 years old. And the pilgrims seek divine protection against natural disasters and try to obtain forgiveness for their own and for everyone else's sins. So between, as I told you, Carnival and Easter, men of all ages and social status get together in groups. Women are not allowed. It's only for men. Each of these groups walk about 250 kilometers around the island for 8 days, crossing the small towns and passing by all churches where there is a Virgin's image. Altogether, there are about 100 temples with a Virgin image. So I'm speaking about having the base of the pilgrimage route to have the biggest trail in the Azores, 250 kilometers. That would be the base. Of course, tourists don't come so much between Carnival and Easter, and so I think they will not shock, let's say, the religious purposes, and then what I'm trying to propose. Each pilgrimage day lasts about 15 hours. It starts about 4 a.m. and it ends only at sunset. The logistics regarding meals and accommodation are planned in advance. Meals during the day are offered by the locals as the results of residents' initiatives, as you can see on the right-hand side. But when pilgrims are away from a town, the locals bring the food to picnic parks, as you can see on the left-hand side. The last warm meal, the night one, is offered by the families that welcome the pilgrims in their houses. That it's a very important issue, is that the pilgrims are welcomed by the locals. It's also something that I want to bring to this traditional, to this new tourist product, and a little bit linking with the speech, with the presentation of Giovanni. So at the end of the day, when the sun sets, as I was telling you, the pilgrims and the locals attend the Mass at the parish church. At the end of the celebration, each family takes home 2 or 3 pilgrims. After a warm and relaxing shower, all pilgrims and family members share a rich meal and some prayers. For those families, it's very important to offer what they have best. It's their way of thanking the pilgrims for the sacrifices that they make to obtain the divine protection for the whole island. Having myself taken part in the land pilgrimage, it provided me with the opportunity to make direct and participant observation, considering the physical realities of the way, the group's behaviors, the host's conduct, and the services organized and offered by the locals to the pilgrims. The research done supports the idea that the pilgrimage may become a starting point of a community-based tourism product, considering at the same time creative and sustainable solutions as the ones which I will present briefly, and having in mind a conceptual model shaped by me. So that is a conceptual model that I created for other pilgrim routes, which can be adapted to this one. In fact, what I have in here, the circles are considered the variables, the issues that are important for the tourists who walk a pilgrimage route. So you have to consider all issues which are important for the ones walking a pilgrimage route, and those issues, they don't have the same weight. Due to that reason, some are bigger than the others. And the square is framing all those issues. I'm going to give you an example, and then you'll see it better. But either here or in another pilgrimage route, you have to know which are the issues important for the tourists walking, and to see the weight in order then to apply to different municipalities. That is to apply to different municipalities. So here, for instance, on the right-hand side, you see an example of a municipality which attained a percentage of 58%. You see, just half of the square. And the private and the public actors can see through the unfinished circles what has been already attained and what is still missing. Just to give you an example, the first variable, it's about the route itself. So you can see here, for instances, on the left-hand side, what it is important in a pilgrimage route. It's to follow passes. We can also consider rural routes, but not asphalt roads. So here on the left-hand side, we have a good example of what we have to do. On the right-hand side, a bad example. If pilgrims are walking along the asphalt road, it's because they don't have any other opportunity. If pilgrims don't have any other opportunity, going from point A to point B, it means that tourists don't have any opportunity either to go from point A to point B. And even worse, locals going also from point B to point B, from point A to point B, they also have to use the asphalt road. So when we turn the asphalt road when we look for a solution, and when we discover a pass, pilgrims use it only once a year. Tourists also once a year. But locals are going to use those passes all year long. Let's say that is not done for the tourists or for the pilgrims, but mainly for the locals. So you can see below in this example, the weight of this variable is 30%, and in this example, 10.5 kilometers are already in passes, and 4.5 kilometers no. How is it represented in the circle? You see circles A, it's drawn 2/3 and 1/3 is missing. So it's very easy to see through this model what it is missing. So here we can see clearly that 1/3 is missing. And when we combine, when we add all these variables, we then look at the table and we can see that this example, 58% means that it is in the average stage. What do I mean? Is that if we create the pilgrimage route here in São Miguel, tourists don't know if they are walking in municipality A, B, or C. They just know that I have better conditions in this area than in the other area. But we don't know the boundaries of the municipalities. We know that some parts of the territory are better, have better conditions than the others. And so this is a way to harmonize and to have all the municipalities going to higher levels. So, as the challenge in here is to speak about creative tourism, based on the creation of that pilgrimage route, I'm going to give some suggestions. The most pilgrimage routes, as the Santiago, this is a good example of the Santiago route. Pilgrims walk and walk and walk, and they just walk. They like to walk. When I say they walk and walk, they like to walk, and people who already performed one of these pilgrimage routes, they know that it's really very interesting. It is the way, as I was telling at the beginning, to discover themselves, to reflect about their own life, the purposes of life, and so on and so forth. Sometimes, as in the Santiago way, the pilgrims offer themselves a day break. because they want to rest and they take profit to visit a city. In this case, you have Coimbra. In fact, in the central Portuguese Santiago Way, the most chosen cities are Tomar, Coimbra, and Oporto. But you can see, they walk, sometimes they stop. What I'm proposing to the Azores, it's a different model, having in mind the type of tourists that probably the travelers, as Giovanni was calling. So, for the travelers, what I'm proposing here is 1 day walk, 1 day activity. 1 day walk, 1 day activity. So we already heard about many different activities. I'm just proposing 5 as an example. There are many, many more. But in fact, what I'm proposing here is that to mix both things, the pilgrimage and the creativity and the sustainable tourism. In fact, tourists would also stay in the homes of locals as pilgrims do. But when we speak about sustainable tourism, and I think that people already referred, but it was not underlined enough, it was not stressed enough, in sustainable tourism, we don't have locals to turn into tourism agents. What we want them is that they keep their main activity. If they are farmers, they should be farmers. And if they are opening their houses to tourists, they are going to get at the end of the month more 200 euros, 300 euros. They are not going to live with those 300 euros. They are not going to leave their main activity. That is a complement. And that is the way that we should look at tourism, mainly in the islands. I'm not saying about, I'm not referring to cities, but mainly the small towns. So, as I was telling you, if we have a 250 kilometers route, it means that in average, each tourist walks about 25 kilometers. It means that for walking the whole route, we need 10 days. And if we have 1 day pilgrimage followed by 1 day activity, it means 20 days. Probably for many people, it's too long for being away from home. So what I'm proposing is to have 10 days program for instances, which means 5 days walking, 5 days with activities, or 1 week. And tourists who really like it will come back for the second time, for the third time, until they fulfill the 250 kilometers. So we can have the whole program, or we can have it shared in 10 days, 1 week, whatever. So some of the activities could be, for instances, the corn leaf. The corn leaf is something that gives tourists the opportunity to take souvenirs home made by themselves. Or, for instances, taking care of cows. This is an example of an activity which is already offered in São Miguel, as we learned yesterday. So this new tourism product could improve the number of customers for the enterprises which make business with this activity. So if you have this one integrated, you can also work in network with other activities. Or we had a good example of photography. I don't have it in here, but it can be very easily integrated. So I'm just give you a hint with 5 activities, but there are many, many others. Another activity is, for instances, the workshop with scales of locally caught fish. Provides the opportunity to create own souvenirs like necklaces, rings, pins, among other pieces of personal use. In fact, some years ago, I worked with the Observatory of Tourism with the Carlos Santos, and we had a very long survey. And in order to thank people for spending so long answering our survey, we were offering a pin I think it was €1. It was not more than €2. It was a fish scale pin. It was so popular that instead of having people walking away from us because they knew they would spend lots of time answering our questions, we were having people coming to us and saying, "Are you going to give the pin? I want to answer, I want to answer." And in fact, it is some of the handicraft. The other activity, the fourth activity, it's about a workshop in the tea plantations. Some activities might be provided in any part of the island, others not. This one, for instance, can be provided only in the municipality where we are right now. So those things have to be planned according to the municipality offer or municipality supply. Or the fifth one, which is always nice, it's to bake the bolo livdo. It gives the opportunity for a fun experience, and at the end, tourists and locals can talk while drinking tea and eating bolo livdo. So, for ending my presentation, what I tried to show is the potential of creating the pilgrimage route based on the existing one in São Miguel. You cannot create a pilgrimage route if it doesn't exist already. What makes a pilgrimage route are the pilgrims who walk for years and years and years the same route. But this pilgrimage route can be only built by a governmental institution. So you have on one level the governmental institution, then the municipalities, and also very important is that the pilgrimage route has to be done or built according to the pilgrims, according to the recommendations of the pilgrims associations. The locals will welcome now pilgrims, but in the future tourists, can be explored, turning the locals in part-time tourist agents, not tourism agents, part-time tourist agents, as I was explaining, but without changing their main economical sustenance profession. And finally, this new tourist product, apart from being a starting point of a community-based tourism, it also reinforces the creative and sustainable tourism development for the Azores archipelago. Thank you for your attention. I try to be brief.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Victor Ambrosio, for bringing us this model, mixing, combining religious tourism with community-based activities. As a matter of fact, we are friends for years, and he came once to São Miguel, and Professor Ambrosio told me I wanted to join a pilgrimage, or made a pilgrimage here in the island. And I said, okay, you can go. And there he went. And when he came back, I was scared to death. He was like, you know, looking at the sky and being very inspired. And I said, my God, what's going to happen now? And then after 3 days, he said, may I go to your office? And I said, yes. And then he wrote this model, wrote it. And then at the fourth day, he came to me and said, well, how are we going to sell it? And I said, well, he recovered. Okay, so now questions from the floor.
Well, thank you very much. That was very interesting. So the idea is to incorporate these tourists in already existing Romeiros groups, right?
No. So one thing is the tradition, and we should leave the tradition only for the locals. They perform this pilgrimage between Carnival and Easter.
Yes, I know. I'm a local. My question is: would the tourists incorporate already existing, or you would create new?
Not at all. Not at all. So we are profiting from the pilgrimage route that we must increase, mainly not having asphalt tracks, only passes and rural roads. So the future tourists would follow the same tracks, the same steps as the pilgrims. They would be welcomed by the locals as the pilgrims are, but it's not to mix the tourists with pilgrims.
Okay,
that
was
is
my-
not possible. That is not possible.
Yes,
And
because
don't
we are
want that
drifting
for
away
sure.
from
No.
sustainability even
One
more.
thing is profiting the base to turn it into a tourism product, profiting from something which already exists here in the islands, but not to mix the
Okay.
things, for sure, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
I'll be very quick because my concern apparently was shared. It was the same question. And I was about to ask, basically, like, do you see any risk of monetizing this so sensitive topic or such important part of the authenticity or culture? Like, because like I was afraid that we'll trying to monetize something.
No. As I was telling you, those are two separated things. But as it is a huge project, because it incorporates the whole islands, we have to have first the governmental level, so bringing the municipalities together to work on that pilgrimage route, which has to be worked in each municipality. So it is a work done by the municipality. And also the network of locals welcoming the tourists. I agree with Giovanni, we cannot have too many rules, but we must have some rules. So, of course, we need a team from a tourism institution here in the island saying, yes, you can belong to the network, I mean the local who wants to offer the house, or you cannot because you don't have the minimum to offer to the tourists. So let's say that it's combining the will of the locals to host the tourists, to earn some money with the tourists, but of course they have to reach at least a minimum standard, a minimum level.
Okay, no more questions. We have now, thank you, Professor Ambrosio. We now have the coffee break. Thank you.
We postponed the parallel sessions to noon sharp, so a quick coffee break, just grab something and then
Again, everyone, welcome to this second session for this morning. We have tourism and sustainability insights from the Azores. We will have a change in the program. The third communication will be by Pedro because some problems with the records. Pedro Miguel Gonçalves Pimentel and his team will be at the end. And we will have the communication and then a little space for debate, for questions, for each one, okay? We are a little bit late, as you know, half an hour. So we will have to finish, at 1 p.m., 1 o'clock. So I will ask everyone to be very synthetic and don't surpass 20 minutes maximum. Then 3 questions for each presentation, and the rest we can talk during lunch or something. So now we will have Ana Isabel Damião da Sarpa Arruda Muniz and Osvaldo Dias Lopes Silva. Ana Isabel is assistant professor in the management department of the School of Business and Economics of the University of the Azores and researcher in the Center of Applied Economics Studies of the Atlantic. Her research interests and publications are focused on marketing, consumer behavior, sustainable tourism, tourism marketing, tourism destination image, tourism experience, so a lot of interesting subjects. She has participated in research projects in the themes of senior tourism, geotourism, ecological and economic valorization of the Azorean forests, and gender equality in tourism. Osvaldo Silva is assistant professor in the Mathematics and Statistics Department of the Faculty of Science and Technology of the University of the Azores, and researcher in the Interdisciplinary Center of Social Sciences. His current research interests are in the areas of exploratory and confirmatory data analysis, sampling, quality control, and applied statistical methodologies. In these areas, he has participated in some research projects and has published articles in specialized journals. So they are going to talk about this subject, tourism and sustainability insights from the Azores. You have the floor.
Thank you.
And we are going to pass. 20 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Ana Isabel Muniz from the University of the Azores. And first of all, I would like to congratulate Professor Carlos Santos from the Observatório do Turismo dos Açores and all the organizing committees for this conference. It's a great pleasure to be here with you. This presentation is based in part of an ongoing investigation about customer experience in restaurants and perceptions about gastronomic tourism in the Azores. The study is based on a broader model and questionnaire, but only a few dimensions of analysis will be presented in this oral communication. This is the structure of my presentation. And I have some pictures from restaurants that usually serve local food. Opportunities for development in small places, such as small islands, are in the enhancement of tourism experiences using endogenous resources and creative tourism. The more creative, the more attractive. Therefore, linking cultural heritage to creative industries can provide a significant catalyst for small places. Intangible heritage, such as gastronomy and local food, is becoming a more important aspect of tourism experiences in order to foster value creation, memorable experiences, and satisfaction. Interest in gastronomic tourism has been steadily increasing in the recent years. However, scarce studies are found on the impact of restaurants in gastronomic tourism. Literature review revealed a high level of neglect when it comes to the role and importance of restaurants in the development of gastronomic tourism. This research investigates whether customer experience in restaurants with local food have a significant effect on satisfaction and perceptions about gastronomic tourism, and also whether the overall satisfaction with the experience has a significant effect on those perceptions. Another local food dish, another local dish. As an evolving tourism experience, gastronomic or food tourism has shifted from being a peripheral concern to a core reason to tourist visitation. Gastronomic tourism has been used to market destinations, to differentiate destinations, to spread the culture of destinations, and to boost the local economy through a variety of tourism activities, such as food festivals, farm weekends, and cooking classes. The growing popularity of gastronomic culinary tourism nowadays allows us to suggest that it will be one of the most promising and successful in few years. First, culinary tourism gives the opportunity to present to tourists the richness of folk traditions, and second, culinary tourism provides an opportunity to involve tourists in the process of cooking. Different kinds of local courses, of national cuisine, master classes with participation of the best chefs are offered to visitors during their tour. According to Bogajat, gastronomic tourism has indicated and continues to indicate the shortest route to sustainable tourism and the discovery of local and regional cultures. Essentially, at the level of a regional entity, the benefits offered by food tourism can be synthesized as follows: foster inclusive and sustainable economic growth, social inclusiveness, employment and poverty reduction, resource efficiency, cultural values, and diversity and heritage. According to the objectives of the study, the following research questions were defined. Hypothesis 1, customer gastronomy experience in restaurants has an effect on perceptions about gastronomic tourism. Customer gastronomy experience in restaurants has an effect on customer overall satisfaction level. Customer overall satisfaction level has an effect on perceptions about gastronomic tourism, and socio-demographic variables such as gender, age, and education level have a moderating effect between customer gastronomy experience and perceptions about gastronomic tourism. This is the model designed for the investigation, where we can observe the relationships that we intend to test between the constructs. Data collection took place in February 2022 based on online questionnaire disseminated through email and social networks. The target population was customers from Azores, Madeira, and mainland Portugal who attended restaurants in the Azores. The size of the sample was 414 people, and exploratory data analysis and partial least square structural equation modeling were used to analyze data. The questionnaire consisted of 4 groups of questions. The questions were adapted from prior relevant studies about customer perceptions about gastronomic tourism, customer gastronomy experience in restaurants, customer overall satisfaction level, and socio-demographic profile. I have here the set of questions for each part. Okay. And the Cronbach alpha coefficient ranging between 0.818 and 0.972 was clearly indicates that the measures are very good to the analysis. In terms of the results, the sample characterization, we have predominantly females, mostly between 18 and 65 years old. Most of the participants have higher education and are professionals employed. And we also had some information about salaries and the place of living. Here in figure 2, we have the perceptions about gastronomic tourism regarding each question. I'm going to present the results. According to customer perceptions, most participants agree that gastronomic tourism is a product with tourist potential in the Azores. Gastronomic tourism must be the brand image of tourism in the Azores, and the archipelago has a good network of restaurants. However, there is a lot of hesitation and disagreement regarding the following aspects: the supply of services associated with gastronomic tourism, the variety of gastronomic routes and itineraries, the organization of gastronomic offer, and gastronomic tourism is the main differentiating factor of the Azores from other regions of the country. Table 1 indicates that all the measures clearly exceeded the recommended minimum values, which ensures the reliability and validity of the constructs. Table 2, hypothesis testing. Hypothesis 1 to hypothesis 2, customer gastronomy experience, was found to have significant influences on the perceptions about gastronomic tourism and customer overall satisfaction level. And hypothesis 3, customer overall satisfaction level, was found to have significant influences on the perceptions about gastronomic tourism. Regarding the multi-group analysis, there are statistically significant differences between female customers and male customers with respect to the effect of customer gastronomy experience on the perceptions about gastronomic tourism. Conclusions. This study concludes that there are positive and statistically significant effects between customer gastronomy experience in restaurants and overall satisfaction and perceptions about gastronomic tourism, and between overall satisfaction and perceptions. A multi-group analysis was also carried out, and it was found that there are significant differences, significant gender differences regarding the effect of the experiences and the perceptions about gastronomic tourism. The relevance for this conference, gastronomy and local foods, can be an opportunity to develop sustainable tourism and sustainable creative tourism approaches in small communities, such as islands, allowing a wider participation of the tourists in local communities and their tangible and intangible assets. Managerial implications can be obtained from these studies. Various marketing activities that attempt to provide travelers with positive, memorable food experiences deserve to be managed on a strategic level as means of destination branding. Experiencing gastronomy beyond being a potential factor of tourist attraction can inspire and aggregate local communities and their institutions in the promotion of peculiar traditional characteristics and identity, such as local food and typical dishes. Knowing the perceptions, expectations, and attitudes associated with all the factors that may influence gastronomic tourism is of crucial importance so that the action to be developed can be properly coordinated and based on scientific knowledge, and all stakeholders are informed and connected with the same objective. Some references, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Anne-Isabel, for this interesting communication about gastronomy and creative tourism. So I open now for a few questions, please.
Thank you. I really enjoyed your presentation. My question is, if you have already, or if you will consider in the future to explore or to use, to adopt a qualitative approach to understand why or the main aspects that are identified for those who actually indicated that they were in disagreement. The less positive part of it, because obviously it's also important. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your observation. Research will encompass the quantitative aspects of the of course, we hear based on questionnaire that
from
experience in restaurants that serve local food, but not only local food. So we are evaluating some aspects like the ambience, the the quality of the service, well, a kind of 5 different broad aspects of customer experience in restaurants. And also we have some questions about local food. Not in this communication, I didn't speak about that part of the study, but of course we also have, well, we have to try to understand if the restaurants are having in the menus some local food or not. We are asking the customers if they tried local food, which dishes they tried, and the opinion about the dishes. But in this part of the communication, I didn't present that kind of questions about the local food. But it's a broad study, not only about local food.
Thank you. Anyone else? Just one more question, please. No? So thank you so much. So we are going to the second presentation, Louis-Philippe Bellec. Louis-Philippe Bellec is an intern architect in Ontario, Canada, and sessional instructor in Laurentian University MacWillan School of Architecture. As a graduate of the University of Waterloo School of Architecture, he completed a semester at the École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne, as well as a semester of studies in Rome, and previously worked in multiple Canadian and European architecture firms. A Luso-Canadian of Azorean descent, he designed research frequently centers. He's designed research frequently centers of the Azores and the adaptive reuse of vacant Azorean architecture. And he will talk about filling gaps, constructing a community-integrated tourism network from vernacular ruins in the Azores. You have the word.
Thank you very much. I will try and speak very quickly to get through the presentation and to get to the question period, in the hopes that we can have clarifications afterwards. So good afternoon, everyone. Today I'll be presenting research regarding the potential reuse of abandoned vernacular ruins across the archipelago of the Azores in order to create a network of small-scale. I'm just going to adjust one thing here before I keep going. There we go. In order to create a network of small-scale accommodations, the resulting parish-level network of touristic infrastructure being integrated within the larger, more holistic and often pre-existing cultural and residential system. The research looks at existing typologies of accommodations available across the islands and a survey of abandoned buildings located on Terceira and Graciosa, and grounds itself in the analysis of the potential that these vernacular buildings have to cater to tourism. And I would like to start by proposing the following image, inspired by something the mayor of Corvo said in the TV docu-series Malamanhados, that perhaps the Azores are not only meant to be seen, but are meant to be lived. For those of you who are joining us today that might not be familiar with the Azores, we're talking about an archipelago that comprises 9 islands and is located in the middle of the Atlantic. Since their settlement, migration has shaped the history of the Azores. The geographic isolation of the archipelago limited the access and departure to and from the islands until the mid-19th century and early 20th century. The advent of steamships and commodification of travel opened the Azores to transatlantic travel. And it's during that 20th century period that the Azores witnessed one of their greatest waves of immigration to North America, Brazil, and Bermuda. Although these immigrants left the islands in hope of a better life, many left with the intention of one day returning. The Azorean diaspora is estimated to be about 3 times the local population across North America. This includes the immigrants themselves, their children, and grandchildren. Today, more than ever before, the Azores find themselves accessible to immigrants and their descendants because of the advances in transatlantic passenger transportation, which facilitates temporary stays and visits. Additionally, this allows Azorians living their migratory experience in North America to maintain their links with their native islands and their culture. Strong cultural retention and emotional ties have catered to the immigrants' desires to return. This is important in order to start understanding our main protagonists, the tourists, which I enjoy more now perhaps the term visitor, which we'll be addressing as we go. For the sake of this presentation, I'd like to propose the following notion, that in the relevant categories of tourists in the Azores, we might start to consider foreigners from either Europe or abroad or the mainland, tourists from the diaspora that have ties to the Azores, and the people who are traveling who come from within the archipelago itself. Over the past years, access to the archipelago has been made easier with our transit. We can see a correlation between the available routes to the communities of the diaspora. One of the main reasons there are direct lines to Boston, Oakland, Toronto, and Montreal. We can also observe that the archipelago condition, the fact that we are many islands, concentrate transportation infrastructures in a hub and spoke network model. So all visitors on commercial flights to offshore or secondary islands must first transit through the main islands of the transit hub. Although only 3 islands, São Miguel, Terceira, and Fayal, with the more recent additions of Santa Maria and Pico, have international airports, all islands are accessible by plane. And during the summer months, boats travel between the islands, although not consistently through the year, and the routes are not always consistent as well. Again, this is just information exposing the current system we're engaging with. All of the 9 islands in the Azores have greater rural territories than urban centers. Out of the 9 islands, 6 are considered exclusively rural, although containing at least 1 town. Rarely has rural architecture or rurality held the same importance in the architectural discourse and the design intervention as urban centers. The location of the 3 main international airports correspond to the islands with the largest capacity for tourist accommodation. So when it comes to accommodations, we can see that there are a number of beds for local accommodations relatively proportionally distributed across the archipelago. But relatively proportionally distributed, I mean relative to population and existing buildings, there is a proportional distribution of accommodations across the archipelago. São Miguel has about 50% of the population, therefore has roughly 50% of available beds. However, proportional at the archipelago scale does not inherently mean equal or equitable at an island scale, not to mention an unequal distribution of hotels and other accommodations tend to be concentrated within urban areas. We also have to look at typologies of available accommodations, meaning what kind of accommodations are available. There exists in the Azores currently various types of accommodations. Based on typology, we have and location, urban or rural, or even system-based through which the accommodations are made available. More traditional touristic models of hotels and hostels, from larger hotels to smaller ones. The category of local accommodation, which encompasses apartments, houses, and everything in between, sometimes typically smaller rental units, both in urban centers and sometimes in more rural and remote areas, register with the municipal local government authorities, and additionally classifications such as rural accommodations or accommodations deemed to be for housing tourism, creating an interesting Venn diagram of overlapping categories, typologies, and with the advent of the digital era, creating new categories of systems like Airbnb. The typologies come to exist in recognition of both the urban and rural landscape in the Azores and the dispersed nature of the archipelago. The image here is a map of the distribution of the two 2021 rural accommodations across the islands. And there's currently 6 types of current rural accommodations that are trying to be identified. Although this model has been a particularly successful one with the advent of rural tourism, it does remain unevenly distributed. So for the sake of this research, I've studied the condition on 2 islands, Terceira and Graciosa. Terceira has a population of about 56,000 people, is divided in 30 parishes, and has 2 urban centers. In the yellow on the map, the one which is Angra, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And Graciosa, by comparison, has a population of about 4,000, 4 parishes, and is all rural. If we look at these 2 maps, we can see that all parts of the islands, or I should say all inhabited parts of the islands, are made accessible by a network of roads. If we look at the distribution of accommodations, however, we can see that, as previously mentioned, there's a greater density of accommodations in the urban centers on Terceira, the hotels being exclusively located in urban centers. There's a distribution of local accommodations across the island, but not an even one, and not in every parish. The countryside and housing accommodations are punctual. In Graciosa, we can see a similar type of distribution, but far more limited in the number of accommodations. Now, if we look at Airbnb, Airbnb being a residential property that hosts or owners can rent on a short-term basis to travelers. It can be anything from a house to a single room to a boat to a tree house. If we think of it as a pop-up accommodation, it's a marketplace where people can rent out their properties. It is a system and not a typology of building per se. The Airbnb model of system starts to reach greater distribution across the island, but still doesn't quite manage to get to all the parishes, and Graciosa remains underserved. There is, however, a unique condition that is found almost evenly across the archipelago, that of the abandoned vernacular house. In 2016, I created an inventory of the buildings showing signs of decay across both Terceira and Graciosa, documenting a total of 1,700 buildings. The inventory sought to create a quantitative and qualitative assessment of the condition of abandonment, which I was noticing on the islands. I photographed, located, and created a technical sheet for each of the buildings I identified in order to create what became a physical catalog and a series of GIS maps. The resulting data allowed me to come to certain conclusions. Most of the abandoned buildings are vernacular houses. Every parish, urban and rural alike, have abandoned vernacular houses, and rural parishes on rural islands are likely to have greater numbers of abandoned vernacular houses. Am I still good on time? 5 minutes, oh my God. Whew, okay. With these conditions in mind, the geography of the archipelago and the conditioning factors of access to the islands, the existing models and distribution of accommodations, I choose to look at how abandoned vernacular buildings could be reused to create a network of accommodations. A network of parish-level community-managed rentals built out of these local abandoned properties that can provide a more cohesive and more comprehensive touristic, traveler, guest infrastructure integrated in a community scale, addressing cultural, culinary, and creative practices and lifestyles. For example, we could imagine that every parish might identify 1 or 2 or 3 houses within the core of its parish. The parish office, the junta, manages the houses, perhaps, and the rental revenue goes to the parish. These houses are made available through a cohesive island-wide booking system for local Azorians when visiting other islands, or for anyone else coming from outside visiting the islands. Eventually, should conditions change, more houses could be restored or integrated within that system, or even sold to new owners for permanent residency. In addition to the data and precedent analysis, I've used a research methodology that is perhaps more common in my field of research than in others, which is what we call research through design. So researching through design is essentially a way of testing and projecting hypotheses. I'll be presenting 2 scenarios and 3 design experiments in the that test vernacular architecture's ability to be reused in possible ways, trying to develop possible ways that could shape this network of accommodation. In order to shape these proposals, I've outlined certain parameters and goals by asking the following questions. What are the spaces that make these vernacular typologies? Which spaces can be maintained or which need, for the kitchen and the wood oven, for example, are incredibly relevant to Azorian life and culture, and which spaces can be adapted to new uses, for example, agricultural spaces used for agricultural activities that are no longer being practiced. What are the contemporary amenities that can be added? Most people today prefer and expect to have a toilet and a shower within the home. How can some of these spaces help ensure cultural continuity? How does temporary occupation impact maintenance over time? How were these houses built, and what are their materials, and how are they important in terms of concerns of sustainable development and the use of local materials, especially within an enclosed island environment? What are the best or most appropriate ways of rebuilding? We have to remember that rebuilding has always been part of the Azores because of the seismic nature of the islands. How do these materials engage with cultural practices? The local clay used for roofs is also the local clay used to make the alguidar, a clay dish particularly used in Terceira to make the alcatre. I'll skip that little quote. How are these houses tied to their immediate communities? How have they been a social catalyst in the past, and what are the potential to promote sustained engagement with local and visiting population? What are the tectonic and spatial elements that tie them to Azorian culture? How are they integrated in the Azorian landscape, in the rural Azorian landscape? How can they promote a sustainable relationship with the existing ecologies and minimize the impact of tourism? Can I ask for another 3 minutes?
Yes.
Okay, so the first scenario. A North American couple are spending a few weeks in the Azores, specifically on Terceira. They've booked 2 houses through this new Azorian-wide housing accommodation network. Similar to the one Airbnb, 1 house in São Brás and 1 on the other side of the island in Santa Bárbara. They arrive by plane, take a 10-minute taxi to the ride to the house, modest in size. The house maintains the traditional kitchen and oven while adding contemporary stoves and fridges, provides an intimate living and working space with the library of books and common objects pertaining to the Azores. The bedroom is located in a converted agricultural space with all the contemporary comforts one would expect. Upon the revival, they are given a parish office guide to the local amenities and contacts within the parish, as well as the names of and phone numbers of the other visitors in the houses on the island within this new network, should they want to meet any other visitors. In the 3 days the couple spends at the house, they walk and drive around, they go to discover local tasks for lunch, watch the sunset near the sea, and spend the rainy afternoon at home reading and watching people go by from the window. In the next 3 days, they spent in Santa Bárbara. Bicycles and mopeds are available for them to visit the city on the first day. This house, with its contemporary layout, uses exclusively local materials and traditional building methods from the local master builder. On the second day, there's a procession of the local saint. The couple watch from the terrace. It turns out that 2 local families have rented the old palheiro, the stone barn, for the day to cook alcatre and soups. This house is a little larger. It makes use of what would have been a quintal, the garden, as a semi-public space where it can be rented and used by the local people in Santa Bárbara for events such as these, to make available the wood oven, the traditional cooking equipment, and outdoor gathering spaces. The couple is invited to partake in the soup making, in the wine drinking, in the meat cooking, and in more wine drinking. On the 3rd day, they spent relaxing and recuperating. They leave planning to come back and explore other parts of the island and wanting to partake in something called o quinto tour. On the second scenario, we are in Graciosa in the parish of Luz. Our visitor is a grandchild of Azorian immigrants from Graciosa, and she'll be staying just down the road from where the grandparents grew up, even though her grandparents told her to go to the bigger islands because there are more things to see. She made the booking online. A local parish office showed her how things work. The living space has been redivided to include a reading area and a central seating space. On the walls are large black and white photos of life in the parish when her grandparents would have been there. The bedroom, however, maintains the particular storage system under and above the very narrow staircase. There is both an indoor and an outdoor cooking area, and the old stone shed is fully equipped with winemaking equipment. She is told that there was a time on the island when there was more wine than water, and to be mindful of how much water you use when you're showering. She walks and bikes across the parish, meets the local donkey breeder, and spends time at the local museum and restaurants next to the port. She also has the opportunity to connect with someone from Terceira, spending a few days on Graciosa for work. They have the opportunity to go eat in town in Santa Cruz. She spends a few afternoons looking out at the sea. She leaves hoping to come back next summer because, to her surprise, it turns out there are still more things to see on Graciosa. This is the last slide. I'm done. These little scenarios, for the sake of the presentation, try to illustrate some ways that culture can be shared and generated at the domestic scale by vernacular architecture and heritage. This research and these proposals question the distribution and typologies of accommodations that currently exist across the archipelago and redefine the tourist as perhaps a guest-host relationship rather than a tourist and service industry. An attempt is made to outline how and what kind of system could take shape and how the impact of tourism in rural islands can start to be mitigated sustainably. And perhaps just maybe the best thing about the Azores is not just what can be seen, but what can be lived. Thank you.
Thank you, Louis-Pierre, for this interesting presentation about, and this very accurate survey about the vacant houses. I will hire you as a consultant of the municipalities and tourism board, for sure. Do you have any questions for?
I want to hire you. Luis, congratulations. As a fellow Luso-Canadian, I'm so impressed with this. Are you continuing this work? Will you go to other islands of Azores?
Possibly.
Oh, so it was supposed to stay here, right? This was, because this is such, I'm not sure if there is such a levantamento. An inventory like that. I've never seen like that before. And it's incredible how, you can come to Pico Island, just in my neighborhood, there's 17 houses for that. And I think everyone in Azores needs to hear this. And you speak Portuguese sufficiently, even though the English slides doesn't matter. This should go around and incentivize not only municipalities, but even our own government. This is what we were talking a little bit about yesterday and even this morning in terms of the houses. We have the houses. We just have to put them up. And I think you would be perfect to show everyone in Azores this. So congratulations. And whatever I can do, let's do it. Come to Pico at least. Okay?
Thank you very much. Thank you. That's very generous.
Another comment or question?
What do you think about the conversation? Imagine people use it for other things before, and now they will use it for tourism. What do you think about it? They can do new things in the house, put new conversation, or you think it should be the same structure? What do you think about it?
Very good question. That enters the realm of how do we reoccupy these houses and how do we rebuild them and how do we restore them? And there are various schools of thought on how preservation is done. And something that was said yesterday that I thought was very interesting is that, and I have it here just not true, is that preservation as part of a process, or that suits a process. Yes, fundamentally, we have to recognize that a simple thing as a toilet and a shower are not part of the original construction. But we want that, however genuine or authentic or our views on preservation has happened. This is something that we want and need. Now, I think there are very rich ways of engaging with the restoration process and how that's done. From everything, what materials do we select to rebuild, rehouse, reshape this building? But the spaces that are created as well. There are certain things that are no longer in use, like agricultural spaces. You know, the shed where you put the donkey, what does that become? Does it become a room for inhabitation for living? Does it become a room where we have the modern donkey, which is a bicycle or a moped? And I think the house as a typology, the house has always been tied to evolution. Domestic spaces are tied to how people live and how people inhabitate, and they expand and they grow and they shape differently. So I think the rural house, the vernacular house, is open to these changes. And it can happen in meaningful and in engaged ways. Santa Barbara, the one example I gave, there is a local master builder that still knows all of the traditional building methods. Why not use that in the house, but still allow for contemporary spaces or changes in the use of spaces? And in something that, when we define the use, because we are talking about temporary use, you know, that can also be adapted to longer term use. You know, this house maybe could be built or be bought and lived in permanently afterwards. And that's why the notion of living becomes important. How do we live in the space? Because then it expands the notion. So the idea of temporary tourist visitation, where we only sleep and then go out and then come back, it doesn't engage with that longer term dialogue. That was a very long-winded answer.
Thank you, Louis-Pierre. We will continue discussing these interesting topics and ideas longer, but we have to go to the final presentation. Thank you so much. So we'll have now a team composed by Pedro Miguel Silva Gonçalves Pimentel, Walter Coito, Rui Castanho, Áurea Souza, and Maria da Graça Batista. I will briefly present the team. Pedro Miguel Silva Gonçalves held a baccalaureate in business management from the Universidade dos Açores, a master's degree in business management from Instituto Superior de Economia e Gestão da Universidade de Lisboa, and a PhD in management finance by the Instituto Superior de Economia e Gestão da Universidade de Lisboa. Walter Couto is a PhD management finance by the Instituto Superior de Economia